Call to order the August 12th Village Council work session for this evening. We have one, two, three, four, five items here. So we'll begin with the discussion of the North Carolina Department of Transportation Traffic Circle Design from June of 2025. Um, in your materials were provided some emails reflecting the meeting that John Taylor and Doug and I went had in Carthage with the chief engineer Reuben Blakely and Lisa Mathis, who's on the North Carolina Department of Transportation board. So we had a good meeting, and we provided them a bunch of questions and suggestions and clarifications. And I see just a few minutes ago I got a reply back. That was back in July, and but they were a lot of serious questions, and we got a reply back. I have not had a chance to read it, but I think the way to begin this a little bit is just by a little quick overview, since this has been going on quite a time. I remember back in June of 2022 when I was a freshman member of the council with Dr. Morgan. It was the first time we heard a presentation here in this very room from NCDOT and their consultants on a proposal that they were making. So this topic goes back many years before that. But the first proposal we heard was in June of 22. It was called the continuous flow intersection. Was the first time I had heard that. The council responded to that in January of 2023 in writing, suggesting that we didn't think that that was a appropriate way to address the Pinehurst traffic circle with their primary recommendation. And we offered them about 10, I think, pretty thoughtful ideas of suggestions to improve the flow of traffic, of which they eventually took up two of them and adopted them. One was the lane dividers that are now there in the traffic circle, and the other was the signs that indicated certain lanes were only for going to Pinehurst or only going to Aberdeen. And so that was progress. Then they put those in place in about January of 2024. Then in March of 2024, they rolled out the now famous shifted pillow, CFI 2.0, and the public became engaged in this very much so. We, as a council, waited until they conducted their public meetings. They held 3 of them. And then we adopted unanimously a resolution in opposition to the shifted pillow. But again, in our resolution, offered to meet and try to keep finding a way to make improvements to the traffic circle without doing what they were originally with the shifted pillow would have done, which was basically eliminate almost every tree and have a series of intersections there. And after that, I wrote to a few of them at NCDOT and said, we're ready to meet to try to see what the next step is. And I proposed a date in September, and the response I got was that would be premature. They need some time. And they said it would take a few months and so forth. But eventually, in May, or actually I guess it was a little earlier than that, probably April, they started talking about an alternative that we hadn't seen. And then in May of 2025, they came up with their latest proposal, which is unveiled a couple months ago there, and they announced that the shifted pillow was no longer a viable alternative, based on the comments from our citizens and and the council. They said, we heard loud and clear, and we have some other suggestions, and that's when we met with them, um, and then they've provided us some information in response to our questions from that meeting. The plan going forward, as really described by them, is that um, tonight we'll have a little discussion here. There may or may not be a discussion of this at the next SMPO meeting. They have scheduled, as of the other day, we learned, on October 28th, public hearing in the Fair Barn. And then, as they did last time, I think they're going to evaluate the comments there and see what might be the next step. They did indicate that, given what they heard from the previous one, and you can now see on your screen, the new one has, it's definitely an upgrade. I'll say that. Um, and in my opinion, if you look to the top of this screen where they've added a small traffic circle at the Airport Road intersection on Midland Road there, they also preserve the entering and exiting on Beaver Lane, which they had eliminated in the early one. That there is, I wouldn't personally would not offer anything but praise for that, because I think that is addressing a real problem there at that Airport Road intersection, and it keeps the Beaver Lane intact. As you come down this way, um, there's still questions, and you saw them in the email that we sent forward, John and I, regarding how much land will be taken where they in people's backyards on that backs up on 211. They are now definitely allowing Midland Road to enter the circle, whereas in the last one they had cut that off and it was going through Dalrymple, and they are no longer going to go through that Dalrymple uh, route, and so I'm hoping we'll just have a good general discussion about this. If we have questions that we haven't thought of before, we can certainly go back to them with additional questions, um, and and then take it from there. I'll ask um, John, who was with me in that meeting, and Doug if they want to share anything in particular. I know John has drilled down in the past on this level of service issue, which is evidently we learned some new things about. But go ahead, John. Let me just take one other thing, because this is important, and it's related a little bit to the land use planning meeting we went up to in Carthage the other week. In their draft plan, they cite the population for 2050 to be projected in Moore County at 170,000. Now, if you recall back when we were going through all this with NCDOT 6, 10, 12 months ago, the number they were using was 180,000. So obviously, they've gotten more data, or they've done more analysis, and they've dropped the projected population figure. So much so that the land use planning draft project refers to the number 170. And John is our in-house expert on these projections. So I'll turn it over to John for now. Go ahead. Thank you.
I guess at 20,000 feet, the discussion that Pat and I had last month with DOT was one that you all may remember. I was encouraging Doug to try to set up much earlier in the year. It was a really good general discussion of what are you going to do and what do we like and what do we not like. We weren't coming to any conclusions because we hadn't seen the plan. They call this the final proposal
New
That
final
said,
proposal, yeah.
when we asked them about certain things in this, they said, well, we're not sure about that yet. So it is final in the sense that this is the shape that they want to propose, which they're calling marquise. And they're calling that, or marquee, I'm not sure which, because it roughly resembles that cut of diamond. It's kind of pointed on both ends, and it is clearly not a circle anymore. But it was a very good exchange of sort of Q&A. They told us what it was, we asked about this, we asked about that, and that was good. And so when we wrote back to them, when Pat wrote back to them, we gave them 5 or 6 things that we liked, starting with the fact that there is far less property being taken via eminent domain. The interesting thing about this is this was not one of the 18 proposals that the consultant did in coming up with the shifted pillow CFI. That 431-page document that they had did not include connecting 211 to Midland Road east of the circle. So this is a brand new design that has been dreamed up subsequent to that. And it comes to light that it was the idea of either chairman or chairman emeritus of traffic engineering at NC State. So there's a guy who knows what he's talking about, and he came up with this, and why the consultants didn't look at this before, I don't know. If you dig down to the level of traffic, connecting those 2 roads, those 2 roads are not the pair of roads that carry the greatest amount of traffic. That pair is 211 and 15501 south of the circle. And that connecting those 2 was the second best option to the CFI last time around. They did it, unfortunately, by taking a bridge up in the air and around to the right, and a lot of people didn't like that. Tore up a lot of trees and what have you. So one of the things that we've asked them is, could they reconsider, could they score again 15501 south connecting to 211? And Doug, thank you for zooming in on this. What's really going on here, if you think about it, is that this is 211 at the bottom coming from the west going into the traffic circle. Right now that is 2 lanes each direction. It will become, so 4 lanes, it will become 6 lanes. 2 lanes going westbound, 2 lanes going into the set of traffic lights, and 2 lanes going south. So if you are coming down 211 and you want to go up to Carthage, and you don't know to take Page Road, or maybe you got on below Page Road, you are going to enter here, and there are 2 lights along this, 2 sets of traffic lights. And you can kind of see at one point where you will shift over to the left and you will make a conventional left-hand turn at a traffic light, right? And the same way, if you were coming down Midland Road heading westbound and you want to go south, you will come through one set of lights just past 15501 going north, and you will again shift over and make a conventional left-hand turn at a stopping light. So there are a total of 3 lights here, 2 on this connection of Midland Road to 211, and 1 in the very south, at the very bottom. The interesting thing they did down there, if you live in Pinehurst Trace, I'm not Pinehurst Trace, what is that?
Manor.
Pinehurst Manor, yes. Right now, if you can manage it, you can come out and work your way across 2 lanes of traffic and turn left and go south on 15501. That will no longer be allowed. You will turn right, you will come up here, and there will be a U-turn lane at the bottom of the quote-unquote circle that you can then turn around and go south, and there will have to be a traffic light there. Total of 3 lights in this configuration.
Well, it sounds like every origin-destination pair has 2 traffic lights, no matter where you're coming from, unless you're turning right.
Yes, if you're coming down
Always
Midland.
going to go through 2 traffic lights.
Now, what are they trying to do here? What were they trying to do a year ago, and what are they still trying to do? I didn't have time to send these out, but they'll give you 2 arguments. The first is level of service, and the second is safety. That's what they say the objectives are. And So when you try to understand what level of service means, this is a very simple table. This is from their capacity model. This is what everyone uses. And they grade each intersection with the letter A through F. And you can see the difference between A through D is an amount that no one would consider significant. You get to A to E, okay, and if they score it as F, I mean, over 80 could be 85 seconds or it could be 10 minutes. So the fact that it's over, that doesn't tell us a lot. And they have different designations for whether it's signalized, which is what they're proposing, or unsignalized, which is what we have now. But that's their background. And they're predicating this on the difference of level of service at peak times. That's what they're looking at. Second thing is the safety. And so I had come across somewhere the fact that it is received wisdom today that roundabouts are actually safer than intersections. And I think the general reason for that is you don't have people turning left across oncoming traffic where somebody runs the red light and gets T-boned or gets hit head-on. You know, most of the accidents, as we know in the current traffic circle, tend to be rear-end collisions. Occasionally somebody gets sideswiped, but there are very few actual T-boning. So I was trying to do some research on that and see what I could find. And I found a couple of papers, one from the state of Florida, one from the federal. And never having done this before in my life, I decided to try to use AI. And so I asked AI if they could give me something on the safety of roundabouts versus traditional intersections. This is 17 pages, including 20, it took about 20 minutes to come up with this. There are, in the bibliography, there are 23 separate papers they reference, including the 3 that I had found on my own, which I was happy to see that. I'll be happy to send this to anyone. This is not Hemingway. This is not wonderful prose. But it basically says, yes, roundabouts are safer. So we've asked Ruben, I haven't seen Ruben's response to the letter you wrote, but we asked him, why are they ignoring that to put an intersection in here and, in fact, adding a roundabout right up the road? And one of the things that the SMPO will be looking at, as I mentioned earlier, is 4 or 5 other places, intersections, where they want to add roundabouts. So that's more a generic question. The final piece, which Pat touched on, is this whole issue of traffic. So one of the things that I found last time in looking at the shifted pillow CFI is, although the state DOT does a traffic demand model for every county in the state, there is no explicit link between the population of the state and the number of trips that they forecast. So the fact that population is going up or down, that does not drive an increase or decrease in perceived traffic. They're using the same assumptions here that they were using a year ago. They say there are about 55,000 trips a day through the circle, and they project that that will be about 80,000 in 2050 or 2055. So it's kind of strange that despite the fact that the population forecast has come down, that they've made no adjustment in that trip circle. And the last leg of the stool that I would tie in, although it's not clear that this is going to be adopted, one of the primary recommendation for the land use study committee that the county commissioner is now looking at is something called the small town plan. The idea is if we're going to have 50 or 60 or 70,000 more people in the county, and we want to avoid sprawl, we want to avoid what's gone on, if you know, at the corner of McCaskill Road and North Carolina 22, where a Morganton Road-like grouping of several hundred apartments has sprung up, surrounded on all sides by farmland. If you want to avoid that, you need to plan, and they've recommended, I think, 6 small towns. This would be a 1 square mile area that might look a little bit like downtown Southern Pines, a rural border around that at less dense housing, and then the rural and agricultural that predominates through the northern half of the county. It also enables what several of the commissioners believe is their biggest challenge, which it tells them where they have to take water and sewer to accommodate this coming growth. The problem, as I mentioned earlier today, is they don't think with the, whatever the general statute was that came out of Senate Bill 382 last year, and the possibility of this bill, 205, the so-called swimming pool bill, to which other things having to do with downzoning have been attached, they're really loath to move on that, to incorporate that in their UDO. So I actually, since I have a little bit of a dialogue with the state demographer, I sent him an email, and I don't have an answer yet. All of the areas in the county are now forecasting traffic growth separately. Doug has done this, and I'm going to sit down with them next week and see how they did that. And I've asked the state demographer, what if Moore County in the aggregate comes up with a meaningfully different population estimate than you have? Because he starts with the federal census, and he works from there. But if the 13 municipalities, or 12 municipalities plus the county, if they come up with a materially lower or higher number, is he going to adjust his number? I've not heard back from him yet. My guess is he will not. He's working off a very rich database, the U.S. Census. As the U.S. Census Bureau makes adjustments, he makes adjustments. That's why his numbers come down from 180,000, it's actually 172,000. And I personally think it's going to creep lower. But if we get to a point where the county can adopt this land use plan and plan these small towns, most of them appear to be roughly along North Carolina 73, just to our north. And if you start developing small towns there, I would submit other retail or grocery options will develop, and that will change the traffic pattern going, that has to change the traffic count going into the traffic circle. Hasn't been incorporated in any of this yet. So we have a number of questions that we asked them. We haven't, I guess you've got an answer back today.
I
but
think
haven't.
it was sent to all of us, so we'll look at it tomorrow. You can't handle it tonight.
I'm happy to answer any, just one example of where they're not finalized. At the very bottom of this, where it's 211 coming toward the traffic circle, you can just barely make out on the, actually, Doug, if you would zoom out just a little bit, please. So these buildings here in the lower right, that's Dalrymple Road. And you see that we're probably 500, 600, 700 feet away from the traffic circle where we have to begin adding 2 more lanes. Right now, we only have 2 lanes going there. They need 4 in the approach to whatever we're going to call this. And they have to have, so each of the lanes is 12 feet wide, and they have to have a right-of-way on that. They're not sure whether they don't need to take what Ruben referred to as a sliver off the backyards of at least a couple of the houses on Dalrymple Road. Yeah. They don't have to take the houses via eminent domain, but there could be, and they're simply not sure yet. They're still working on that.
And one of the questions we posed is, what's going to be in place of the shrubbery and trees that are now there as a screen? Because you could go with the sound barrier walls that we see sort of in bigger cities, or you could go with nothing, or you could try to bring in enough shrubbery and all to make it seem like nothing's really changed. I don't know. That's one of the questions we asked them because...
And based on our conversation, that specific question, Ruben said that they had additional landscaping funds as part of this project, so...
Right, that's why the
The
landscape...
intent is to make it nice, and a sound barrier wall may even be an option.
So my bottom line is this is a lot better than the shifted pillow CFI. There are a lot of things to be happy about. I don't know whether they can change the October 28th date. That is a council meeting night. And if they want to start at 7 o'clock, maybe we could do just a regular meeting and not do a work session that night or something.
We
but
could.
Right.
They're going to start, yeah. Doug, you can revisit that with them on October 28th.
Yeah, we can.
But that may
or we meet earlier. Or, yeah, we can do something.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's right, we can meet earlier.
Yeah, just to cover a couple other bases, this turn, which is Midland Road going south on 15501, that will cut across some of the property that is currently owned by the resort. They indicate that DOT's had some discussions with them, and probably it's not enough that they have major agita over that, but that's obviously something for them to work out, so.
That's additional sliver.
Another sliver, yes.
think you covered it all.
Yeah,
John, about the whole issue of level of service and population, which again was the driver at the beginning of this several years ago. That and keep in mind that they're still planning to start this 5 years from now. So there's not this sense of urgency that's going to begin. And they also, in response to a question, said that it's about that same time they will begin widening 15501 north from the circle going towards Carthage, because that's the only two-lane road that comes to the circle. And it will continually be backed up further and further if it remains a two-lane road. They acknowledge that, and they're so.
And just to acknowledge Mr. Boyles, who spoke earlier, the proposal that he made, which is to connect 15501 north and south, the number 2 suggestion of the 431-page report was to connect 211 and 15501 south, and those two legs carry the most amount of traffic. There was a proposal, it actually was the number 2 proposal last year, but they were going to go up in the air as you come north on 15501 and go in a bridge around and through the trees and whatever. And people didn't like that for aesthetic reasons. One of the things that we've asked them to do is to reconsider that. But rather than using a bridge, maybe do it as a trench through there. It's something that can be done with minimal disruption of the trees, and it and would preserve the circle itself, but it would take 20 to 30% of the traffic during peak hours, if I remember the number, out of having to go around the circle itself. So in any event,
yeah.
Go ahead, Barb, you have something?
How do you get, if you're on Midland Road coming out of Pinehurst going west, how do you get to Midland Road from Midland Road?
I'm going to defer to my colleagues after I make a comment. I think when you turn right, going towards, you're coming off Midland, and you're going towards Aberdeen, because at that point there's shrubbery between the road going to Aberdeen and the road above it. I think there's a stoplight there, and you make a left
yes, there is.
to go back that way towards Midland. You see what I'm
So-
saying, Doug?
Yes, you're coming out of Midland. Is that where you're
Yes,
coming
you're
out
coming
of
out of
Pinehurst?
Midland.
Yes.
Eastbound on Midland Road.
Yeah, you go down here and then you can cut across.
That's,
then-
that's going to be that's
And get on the
Gotta
right
be a
lane and go.
stoplight or something.
yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, there's a stoplight here.
Yeah,
That's
one
the
of,
third light is right down at that
that's
point.
one of the
To
issues.
facilitate the U-turn and the left turn.
I got you. Okay.
Good question.
I will say we need to give them credit. They did exactly what we said after the meetings, and everyone was in an uproar that they didn't take any houses or minimal takings. They kept a lot of trees, and they kept the circle as much as they could. So
Definitely an upgrade.
Yeah.
But it's
It just seems curious that the major flow is 15501 and 211, and it just don't look like they're connected very well. I mean,
Well, philosophically, do we really want to put, we, or do Southern Pines really want to put more traffic on Midland Road? And why? If the premise is someone's coming down 211 and they're not going to Target, they're not going south, if they're going to Rayford or someplace like that,
or if they're going to the airport or they're going to the San Jose Community College, they'd go straight through.
yeah, possibly.
Yeah, sure.
But is that really, is that road, which is currently a 35-mile-an-hour speed limit and 2 lanes each way, does DOT want to put more traffic on that than they do on a 45-mile-an-hour road, which is 2 lanes already?
yeah, I think it's all about destinations. So
No, but that pairing is not the major traffic pairing. It was number 2 in one of the peak hours, morning or afternoon, I forget which.
and John, you said this earlier, but they emphasized that this was their final design. And what does that mean?
Well, it's
We'll see.
a long list of final designs.
But I would say that they're very willing to tweak this. I reached out to Ruben and said, hey, could we add pedestrian from this little circle and bring it up here to Memorial Drive? Said that was something they would certainly include. So they're willing to tweak it. I don't think there's going to be a large appetite for major changes, but
Well, we'll have to see. And we'll have to see if we really, that's what we, how much of, what constitutes the major change? It's all in the eyes of the beholder, I guess, because the surprise here to me is that they're no longer married to the idea of 211 going to 15501 South, which was the very premise from the very first meeting we had in June of 2022, and it continued through the shifted pillow. They now are going this way, probably to preserve a lot more of the circle and the trees.
Right.
But anyway, that's one of the questions we asked, and we'll see what they say.
What I have never seen in any of these designs is the ability to be flexible and to use modern technology, adaptive AI and or lane shifting and or
They say that that is built into the light signals already. They
that's
do that.
light signals. I'm talking about adaptive changing lanes. You know,
Ah,
going back how many years now? The Tappan Zee Bridge, they would move the center barrier over so that you'd have 3 lanes in the morning going in and 3 lanes on the coming out.
they still do
So, I
that
mean-
in Houston.
I mean, it seems to me that there's some newer technology relative to AI and adaptive lane control that I have never heard them talk about.
Jack, it is my recollection that there was a point in time, probably in the late 90s or mid 90s, where there were actually 2 lanes of travel in the circle. Do you recall
Yes,
that?
yeah, absolutely.
Counts? Do you recall why they took that out?
I don't know. Seemed to work okay. People were a little less traffic then, you know, and everyone knew where they were going to go, more or less.
We don't need this lane, let's take it out.
Other, Barb, Dr. Morgan, any other thoughts or comments? And I think the next steps, we need to absorb whatever Ruben's response was. We'll share it with everybody. And then, obviously, as Dr. Morgan mentioned a month or 2 ago, is urging citizens to let us know their thoughts and speak out. So there's going to be a public meeting they can attend in October, and they can contact us and others as they wish.
Boy, it'd be interesting to see how they would, during construction for the year and a half or 2 years or whatever, how they can route traffic through this process.
yeah, we talked about that briefly. And I mean, this major portion in the circle can be done without touching the other sides. But yes, there will be pain involved.
Route 5 will be interesting. Route 5 will be interesting when this happens.
And just close on an observation John made about the small model plans, and maybe why traffic may not forever be going down 211 to go to Walmart. Okay, and that is the recent opening of the Tractor Supply Company store as you drive out 211. Brand new, nice big store, and to me, it's sort of the canary in the coal mine that there's going to be development out there, so people don't have to come all the way down here to do their shopping. We don't know how much, but if you're going to go from 2 to 4 lanes, and you're putting in sewer and utilities, and you already see one big brand name store, and you keep driving out that way, I think you're going to see others, which means not everybody has to come down here for everything.
Yeah, I agree there will be more. I don't think there's going to be a Target out there anytime soon, though. So,
No, that's true. That's true.
and the high school, so there's certainly still going to be destination points that
Absolutely.
they're going to have
And
to get
there'll
to.
still be Amazon Prime. Okay. All right. We'll follow up with the new information, and we may or may not want to have more to say at our next first meeting in September, because that'll be after we've heard from some residents probably, and after SMPO if there is a discussion, and so Doug, we'll just play that by ear for now.
Sure.
Okay. All right. Topic B. Doug, it's discussion on strategic planning process and outline for 2027.
Yeah, there's a memo that I'm sure you've had the opportunity to read. I actually don't want to really drive this conversation. I want it to be more feedback from you. I did offer some suggestions and what we might be able to do, but this is more a, hey, how did it work for you guys? What do you want to do differently next year? To summarize, I think I've heard that you want a council-led discussion, brainstorming, as the initial step, or maybe one of the first two steps. And then I've also heard a overall financial review would also be would be helpful at the beginning. So my suggestions, I added those in, but feel free to change or do whatever you would like.
John, do you have something?
Yeah, I found attending the strategic retreat 3 days after Barb and I were officially appointed was mind-numbingly difficult because of all of the numbers that were thrown at us. And I'm think of myself as reasonably quantitative, and it was difficult. So the idea for certainly whoever the two new council members will be, giving them at least, in addition to the regular onboarding, giving them a background on the budget, at least at a 20,000-foot level, will allow them to participate more smoothly as we move into the next budget cycle. So that was the first point. Second point was, my recollection from that, it was all driven, the quote-unquote strategic retreat was driven by what staff is already working on. And that's not what, I think Jeff made the observation a while ago that we are not an operational board, we are an executive board. We should stay above the fray, so to speak, the minutia. But in order for staff to really tell us what they're going to be working on, we need to have the opportunity to tell them whether there's anything we want to add. We know that there are always things that carry over from one year to another that don't get completed. And the way that in the preparation of the strategic operating plan, there's a chart that's got the arrows going from the IAPs upward. This is our chance to have many fewer boxes on a slide and drive the arrows downward. And it may not result in anything, or it may result in just a couple of things. One example I can think of off the top of my head that we've kicked around a little bit is the observation of the trying to bend the cost curve downward for the growth rate of expenses so that it is closer to the growth rate of revenues. There are some things we could talk about that might bend the revenue curve upward also. Things that you know, we forecast new home starts, but we don't necessarily forecast the impact that has on the increase in the tax base between the county revaluations. In any event, I think this puts council in the position of thinking if there are any new strategic objectives and giving them to staff in time that they can formulate their plan for the coming year, in addition to not delaying the preparation of the budget cycle that statutorily we have to complete. So actually, it was one of the things that Doug and I discussed on the way up and back to Wilson. And so Doug, I like the way you've laid it out with the one exception of trying to understand how to sequence onboarding with the financial presentation for the new members of council.
I agree. When I first read this, it occurred to me that the first two items that you created answer exactly what you are talking about in November and December. And I think that's a great idea. And that really frames everything else that we do. I think the process looks great and definitely.
Scroll up a little. So the first, are we going to have another discussion? Is the next discussion on this topic in November, or is there something between now and November in your mind?
So as outlined here, it would be in November. So we would have the election, and then we'd have onboarding shortly thereafter for the new council members. Hopefully before Thanksgiving, we also could do a financial overview with all of the council, both the sitting council and any new members that could come and follow through on it. Once the new members are appointed, we could have in December a more open discussion, brainstorming about what council sees as priorities, what you want to see us working on. Following that, after the holidays in January, staff would come back and say, we heard you, this is what we're thinking, are we all on the same page? And from that, we can build out the budget, and then come April, we'll give you what that budget looks like.
And just to be clear, this is not in any way to suggest that staff shouldn't be raising new things. Carlton's still in the back here. I think about the enterprise, leasing program, which he originated. Please bring those anytime. Those are not captive to any particular calendar. But as a general process, I like this better.
I like that it gives council the strategic direction, and that's why you're elected, to provide that overall encompassing direction. And I think this gives you an opportunity to do that.
Between now and then, we should be working on what are the 2 or 3 or 7, I don't know, agenda items for that. Another one might be to look at the action items in the comprehensive plan. And there are not that many of them.
There's a lot, well, there's quite a few.
Well, but, and some of them are done, and some of them may have become academic.
Right.
But are there ones in there that have fallen through the cracks, or people just aren't thinking about? Take one example. There's a recommendation to turn Market Street downtown into a pedestrian mall. I'm not saying whether we're going to do that or not. We haven't talked to the merchants. We don't know whether they're for it or against it. And obviously, we want them to be for it if we're going to do it. But it's in the comp plan. I haven't heard any discussion of it in the last year and a half that I've been on the council. And maybe we shouldn't. Maybe we just X that out and say that we're not doing that now. We'll leave it in the comp plan, but we're not doing that now. Just one example.
But a worthwhile discussion. So we need to do that. Doug, do you recall when we'll get the annual comprehensive?
Financial report?
Yeah, is that going to be?
October usually.
Okay.
Maybe it was early November, but
That's
yeah.
fine. Okay, it was this side of the year. Thank you. I think that's an important document for us as we sort of scan the future and look at the past. They cover 10-year spans there, and it puts things in perspective. The other thing, I made a couple of minor notes. There are some things that they may, and these come under the idea of strategic thinking of things that are on the horizon for us that we've touched on a little bit. One was the establishment of sort of 3, I'm going to call them advisory committees for lack of a better name. We discussed about one for the archives, we discussed about one for the library, and we discussed about one for the harness track. We need to think about it, figure out what it would mean, how it would be structured, because I like the idea of having them from the standpoint of citizen involvement, but it needs to be something that is a manageable task because we're putting 3 new groups together.
Well, the other thing is whether it's permanent and or task oriented, you know, for a year or 2 to take a look at the harness track for a year.
There's a good part. I hadn't scribbled that out. And the other one we talked about, but I think we ought to also kick around pretty seriously at the end of this year, is what do we do, and I know we're looking into finding out what other people do, for the 250th anniversary of our country's founding, so that we participate somehow in that. And I guess there are various groups and organizations planning ideas, and we ought to just figure out how we fit into whatever's happening. Those are the things I had scribbled out. Any other thoughts of things that? So Doug can hear these and just sort of remind. He can come back to us and say, "Forget about that," or here's how this might work. I don't have a roadmap for any of them other than a concept. So
Laid out a good plan there.
so we're set there. Let us go to our next item, which is consideration of the street light placement in decorative versus standard fixture. All right.
So,
Go ahead.
street lights are a touchy subject here, if you didn't know. But it is always an area that scores low on our citizen survey, which is because we have very, very few of them. So we went to the NAC with a proposal for lights at certain major intersections around the village. And for the most part, we got an okay from those. We sent out a letter to the abutters of where they are going to be. We weren't necessarily asking for permission, but just kind of notifying them we were going to do that. There were a couple that pushed back and had somewhat legitimate reasons, and so I removed those. But for the most part, that list of streetlights is included here. I do not think we need to go in it in detail.
Can you
But
go back to the map, though, with
Yep.
the diagram? That was helpful.
so the one question was decorative or the regular. So this is the area that all of our current decorative streetlights are.
Those are
and-
the ones, the green poles with the bulb on top. Yeah,
Yep.
that's very nice. Go ahead.
And there were a few in here that were randomly wood poles with the Cobra heads on it. And so I'm suggesting that in this area, we switch those out and we have it consistent throughout the downtown area. And I think there was 8 of those. The cost to switch all of the wood poles throughout the whole village to decorative, it seems very expensive to me. It'd be like $72,000, and that's an ongoing cost every single year.
Yeah, I agree with you there.
So
And I do think that the way you have this drawn is the right picture of, if it's 8, whatever you said, 8 or, I think that's where they belong. Because it's sort of, as you walk through the village sometimes, you're passing those lamps. In some cases, they're a marker for people, and in other cases, they provide a little bit of light for safety. But I think that'd be very helpful, and it goes with sort of the beautification of the village, at least in my.
yeah, and depending on what future development looks like, say around the Rattlesnake Trail,
Right.
obviously we can add them there.
Yeah.
yeah.
That's a good.
So-
Okay. What else do you need to know about that? You need. So your next step is what, Doug?
I will give the list of new lights and those 8 changes from regular to decorative to Duke Energy and say, when can you do this?
Okay.
I know you're typically looking for at least 3 out of the 5 of us. I certainly support decorative poles in the area you're talking about.
Yeah.
And then I'm not willing to spend $72,000 on
Yeah,
decorative everywhere.
I don't think anyone has indicated they don't want to do that. So now, do you have any ballpark idea? They're going to say we'll get to this next year, or they'll no idea yet?
I mean, I talked to him, that was a while ago, and it was more like a 6-month plus project than a
Okay.
2-month project.
All right, makes sense. All right, and is that something you're going to share with the NAC when they come back? Because remember, there were a couple people there who were sort of pushing this.
Yep, I can certainly do that. And I can reach out to the east-west Old Town people specifically.
Okay, I think that would be very helpful because of their interest. I think it was, a matter of fact, Mrs. Wicker had a particular interest. Wasn't she someone who emailed us?
Yep, and she had suggestions for which lights should be decorative, so we got most of those.
We have lights on our crossings of like Route 5.
So that's where a lot of these that I added are on state roads at major intersections. So,
Yep.
yes. So we're adding one on Highway 5 in McKinsey because there's not one there.
Right, that's what I was thinking of, yeah.
But yeah, we looked at and to make sure that the major intersections on Highway 5 and 211, et cetera, were all covered.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I think you got what you need to know there, right, Doug?
Yep.
All right. So now we go on to request to issue statement of interest and qualifications regarding Village Place core. This is something we've talked about and kicked around, and Doug's come up with a proposal to begin sort of the real process here and see who's got an interest and who doesn't. And you gave us a draft. I think I gave you. I don't know if I did.
Yeah, so Jack and Pat both gave me a little bit of comments on here. So Pat, you mentioned to also discuss the PDO.
Oh
So,
yeah, I wanted to reference the PDO. Yeah.
yeah, so we included that in this paragraph here. And Jack included a comment, focusing on, I forget which one. Oh, this special note that, we're looking to maintain that feel and vibe of what the small area plans were encouraging.
Scroll back a minute. 'Cause there's one other thing. Oh, I know what I'm not sure how important this is, but I was going to flip the middle dot. I think
Oh, you did say that.
I think parking is more on people's mind than a road connection. So I would just make planning for shared parking and infrastructure improvements. I think that rings more true with people than when they get to the. I'm for leaving the power plant road connection among the 4 bullets, but I would just put parking up there.
2 and 3.
Yeah.
And then Jack also suggested a few more maps, which I thought will be helpful too.
Oh yeah. Which ones are they included here?
Yeah, these ones.
Oh, okay.
After, in a few
Oh,
weeks,
yeah.
maybe we can add this onto there as well.
Right. Well, you can. Yeah, maybe purple with stripes or something, so they know we sort of got it.
It'll soon be ours.
Soon be ours. Yes.
But I hope that we can send this out. People that are interested can approach us. We can have a collaborative conversation about who wants to do what it might look like overall. And what I think this helps us do is not make it look like we did it in a back room and it was only a couple of people that we
Yep.
had special conversations with. It leaves it open.
I agree with that, and I guess we'll know once we get responses as to what we want to do next. Is that your view?
Yes, and again, I hope the next step is, we got 4 or 5 people that have interest, and we all sit in a room and be like, hey, what are you thinking, and how does that go with what these other people are thinking? Maybe there's something collaborative we could do.
Great.
I will specifically send this to anyone who is a property owner in this area, so they are very much aware of what we're trying to do.
Will we put an ad in the paper, or what? We will. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I do think it deserves, when we announce this, a news release about it, because there is and will be interest when people see that we're talking about that, because too many people drive by, see things cleared, wonder what's happening, and this will put a little exclamation point on the idea that we're engaged. That's a great map.
Doug, can you go up to page 1, please? Yes, down to the redevelopment focus area. I had highlighted, this has changed.
Oh, yes, this was the other thing that Pat, you suggested, is that before it made it seem like we really had no intention whatsoever of moving public services. This softened it lightly, saying that, we don't intend to, but if there was the perfect solution, we'd be open to considering it.
No, good. This is actually better language than what I had. I had the same reaction. We shouldn't preclude it, even though
Right.
we're not inviting it. And I like this better than what I had, so good.
Okay. Well, Doug, proceed and keep us posted as when you're ready to launch.
Yep.
So, cheerleaders. Okay. Ward County Land Use Plan process. A lot of these things are linked, as we know. Last week or so, myself and John Taylor went up to Moore County Courthouse. During the morning, they had their regular meeting. In the afternoon, they had two topics that took up about 4 hours. One was the regional airport issue. You've seen this in the paper about um, whether or not there'll be an expansion of commercial service. It's been discussed for many years. There was a consultant who gave a presentation, um, and I'll sum it up with one sentence. There was no one who's opposed to commercial service, but there was no one on the Board of Commissioners who wanted to risk public funds, because that was part of the discussion, underlying discussion.
Go back, I mean,
Yeah,
the issue is before an airline will commit to come, they want a guarantee of revenue. So who's going to be on the hook if you fall short? Right.
Dr. Morgan, you have strong feelings on this? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I'll be willing to start a whole bunch of businesses if you have guarantee of revenue.
And I actually thought that the presenters were maybe just a little bit premature because they don't really have any money in hand. I think they will get some. They went out of their way to say that they were not asking the commissioners to make a commitment, at least at this time. They're looking for it was a 2-year commitment.
Yeah, and evidently this has occurred 15 years ago, Jack, or something. It was Delta Airlines, and whenever the economy went south, whoops,
I mean,
we, not meaning the Village of Pinehurst, but
they've
had to
identified.
pay.
They've identified one airline that's very optimistic and wants to do this, and someone asked the key, well, if they're so optimistic and they see, why do they need the guarantee? And of course, there is no answer to that, but,
So anyway, that was the first half of the discussion, and that was the takeaway. The second half had to do with the land use planning, and Larry Best was on the phone from Montana. Robert Hyder was there in Carthage. They were the co-chairs of this group, and there were people who were on it in the audience, and then there was the actual planning and zoning board of Moore County sitting around a table, and then there were the 5 commissioners. And Deb Emsinger sort of led the discussion, and they went over a plan, a draft plan, I don't know, 10 pages or so. And it was discussed a little earlier here. It was this concept of a small town model with a rural edge, which I take to mean the ETJ, and then agricultural land behind it. And Ms. Emsinger talked about the potholes of legislation in Raleigh that complicate these things that they have been developing and working on for, let me say, a year and a half.
I think complicates is a very kind word.
I'm trying to be kind, Jack. We're here at Village Council at 8:30. So
Matt is not here, but I'm sure he's listening.
yeah.
so.
So the commissioners just said we got to keep moving ahead. We know there are problems here. Chairman Paserno or Commissioner Paserno said his major concern was water. That's what he put that out there. Tom Adams said there has to be the political will to say no for some of these things to succeed. Robert Hyder said that you all, he was really talking to the commissioners, are the stewards of the county, and that you need to sort of speak out and take the lead on this. So that draft is in the hands of the Board of Commissioners, and I guess they're going to see the next steps involved, what they're going to do. This is, this sort of dovetails, Jack, with a little bit with our PDOs going
Right.
through, and it was quite a crowded room, and it was the chair of the Board of Education was there, the school superintendent was there. There were people from Vass and Cameron that I saw in the audience. ourselves from Pinehurst, Southern Pines had a couple of people there. So people are watching this closely, and which I thought was good. So anyway, that's where that stands. John, you want to have opine a little more about what's going on here?
Yeah, again, Pat, first of all, I think you summed it up right. Kurt Cook was losing his voice, so although he's the chair, he couldn't really say a lot. And I think that Nick was attempting to speak in his place, but finalizing the land use plan, he wants to try to figure out how to do it one way or another, because that will drive where they go with water, which he sees as the big thing. The other thing and they didn't go down to the recommendations, I actually brought the draft recommendations from the land use study plan. And there's one that I guess there was one thing that nobody wanted to say, perhaps unsurprisingly, which is, can we speak to our state congressional delegation about maybe getting some help or clarification on some of these things that are problematic? Nobody wanted to say that. And secondly, one of the recommended action items was to establish a county-wide commission to study the impact of growth and develop mutually agreeable growth scenario for the county that ensures that all local governments are working toward a coordinated growth pattern that enhances the living environment for all county citizens.
Wow, that's a handful of statement there. Wow.
I think it's, I've said this to a lot of other people. If we do what we think is optimal for us, and so do the other 11 towns, and the county commissioners do what they think is optimal for the county, that does not mean that the resulting stew will be optimal. So the idea of actually having a more formal body that will include a couple of commissioners and the mayors or whomever, the village managers and whatever, I think it's a great idea. And I think to the extent that we can, we should be working in support of that. Not because I think we will be unnecessarily adversely impacted. I think you could argue if we are in fact closer to fully built out than anybody else in the county, these things might have less impact on us. But nonetheless, in terms of the surrounding area, traffic, regional issues that will impact on us, I think this would be a great idea.
Yeah.
You know?
John, sorry to interrupt you, but I think that was the original intent of the Tri-Cities meetings that we hold with the mayors and the managers, was to address these on a regional basis. Was focusing more on Southern Moore County, obviously, because it's 3 towns here, but yes, maybe it could be expanded to include more.
Jack, you have any thoughts?
No, well, it's an ambitious plan. Once again, my observation is that over the years, what seems to be from time to time an issue is the political will to implement them.
That's what
No.
Commissioner
Well,
Adams mentioned.
And they're going to have issues if they need to redo their uniform development ordinance with the down zoning regulations
Oh,
that
yeah,
are now
the
in place.
down zoning regulation sort of throws half of these
Yes, exactly.
recommendations out the window, to be honest with you.
Yeah, Ben Sminger basically said if that becomes the 205, if that becomes law, we almost can't rewrite our UDO in the way that's consistent with the land use study plan.
But I think that the land use plan, and I saw Larry Best's presentation on small town and so forth. It was a wonderful presentation. Again, we may be about 50 years late, to be honest with you, but I think it's, it's idealized, and in fact, conceptually it can work to an extent, but it'll take some effort.
Well,
And I think they're also hoping that the alternative is so unpalatable that it will actually drive doing this because,
Could be, yep.
you know,
right. Any other thoughts on this or comments on something else before we gavel ourselves to the end of this journey? Hearing.
One more thing on the land use plan. It was more specific than you normally see these comprehensive plans, to be honest with you. Very specific in some regards. I mean, our comprehensive plan is at a much higher level than their comprehensive land use plan that they were developing, or at least what I saw so far from Hyder and Best. I mean, it was reasonably specific. And to implement the specificity in that type of environment is very difficult.
Well, they're both Best and Hyder have this incredible reputation, and they've been around for a long time. You probably know them for a
Yeah.
while, Jack.
Oh, yeah.
And
Well, Robert was very involved in our 2013 redo of our PDO.
I think he said he wrote the first PDO in '94 or whatever, but I'm not saying he did, but it's what he says.
all righty, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to adjourn.
Second,
Aye.
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 So adopted. Okay. Thank you, Doug, Carlton,